All those in favor?
Aye.
Good job. So, approval of tonight's agenda. Motion, please.
Make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so next on the agenda is student comments.
All right, well, thank you very much for having me. So we had a really busy week last week. We had a lot of things to do. First of all, the ICED Epic Challenge Convention happened last week, which was a program in which Nipmuc Regional High School hosted innovators and researchers from around Massachusetts who kind of informed teachers and high school students about subjects relating to STEM. And that kind of happened because last year there was a trip to Finland in which Nipmuc students presented their work to the University of Eastern Finland. So on the first day, students were at a convention with Dr. Karmada, retired NASA astronaut and senior advisor for engineering development at NASA Langley Research Center, as well as developer of the innovative conceptual engineering design methodology and founder of the nonprofit Epic Education Foundation. There was also retired NASA scientist and advisor Kathy Lurini and Larissa Shelkin, founder of the Global STEM Education Center, and and they touched upon several STEM topics. Friday, students went to Clark University where they studied Dr. Robert Goddard, who is a Worcester native. And furthermore, it kind of accumulated on Saturday where ICED Epic Innovation Sessions opened to students and educators. At that session, they were given presentations by Richard Rogers, as well as Dr. Charles Camarda, where they learned a lot about how it was like to be in the space station. And big thanks to Mr. Gorman for putting it all together. So that was really great. That was a really good opportunity for students. We had Wellness Week last week, which is a really unique opportunity for Nipmuc students to focus on their wellness. It kind of kicked off November 8th with Warrior Wind Down Weekend, which is basically, we had a 4-day weekend where we had no homework and we were just kind of told to focus on, getting sleep, just spending time with our families. You're just kind of focusing on wellness. So we had a lot of activities throughout the short week. We had Thursday, which kind of had like team building. Thursday brought everything from team building, Tuesday activities, and we had a bunch of different sessions where students could kind of focus on their wellness. They had like kite flying and ping pong, Zumba, kindness rocks, therapy dogs, just a wide variety of things to do for students. And then we kind of came to a close on Friday with Fitness Friday, where students kind of went for a walk outside and just kind of wore their favorite athletic clothing. And looking ahead, we have FAST, which is right before Thanksgiving break, which is really a fun day in which we get to have a competitive sort of bonding experience between both classes and teachers. We also have Thanksgiving break coming up, and an Inspired Learning Day, formerly called the 21st Century Learning Day, in which we take an entire day to focus upon different modern learning aspects. And we're really excited for this year because it's actually an entire district. I believe last year it was just Nipmuc, but now we're doing it K through 12. And we're going to do some cross-school collaboration. So we're really excited for this because it's a great program. And then also coming up, we have the Nipmuc Winter Concert. So we're going to have our fantastic music program performing some holiday classics, and that's going to be on December 11th at 7 p.m. So that's pretty exciting. And that about sums it up. Thank you for having me.
So December 11th is huge because it's the district-wide Inspired Learning Day.
Oh yeah.
It's the winter concert, and it's as an added bonus, it's my birthday, okay? Could we have a better day than that?
We could not. So it's going to be a big day.
Thank you for that announcement.
Absolutely.
Oh, that was in the agenda too.
Yes.
Mr. Flyer's gonna have to sing happy birthday up there.
Thank you very much, Owen.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, next is community comments, if there's any community comments out there. Seeing none, we'll move on. Superintendent's comments.
Okay, good evening, everybody. First, you should have in your packet the application that was submitted just this past Friday for, and I think I reported out on it previously about this pilot group known as the Kaleidoscope Collective for Learning that the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, has put forward to all districts across the Commonwealth. And it's a pilot program that really the genesis of it is a discussion around MCAS, which we're going to be talking about tonight, and thinking about different measures to really get at the heart of deeper learning for students. And as a matter of fact, Commissioner Riley has spoken over the last year and a half or so, rather passionately at times, about looking at alternatives that really kind of bring into things like collaboration and more critical thinking and application and other use of higher order thinking skills in lieu of the very traditional MCAS. As a matter of fact, he's talked about a vision of how great it would be to have a state assessment that would have performance-based tasks where kids would be working with classmates and doing hands-on work and so on. So the idea behind this Kaleidoscope Collective pilot group would be over the next year and a half, starting in January, a group of districts would work on things like performance-based tasks, would work on things like other performance-based assessments such as portfolio assessment or capstone projects or senior projects and so on. And in being part of this group would have a temporary reprieve from MCAS requirements to pilot out other performance-based assessments that would go towards accountability assessments. So if you read through, I think they're looking for districts that are already kind of immersed in the work. I don't think that there's any guarantee that will be selected, but I do think that we're a very strong applicant because of the things like Owen was just talking about, Inspired Learning Days, now Learning Adventures, and things like that that we've really been immersed in and is strongly part of our strategic plan. So it's a very short turnaround time. They're saying by the end of this month or early December we will know whether we're a finalist or not, with the intent to start the collective in January. Okay, so I will keep you posted every step of the way.
Very excited about that.
Yeah. I think it's his vision is right on target. Second piece, and ironically, Owen stole my thunder a little bit, but it's directly tied to it. We received the really great news that Jim Gorman, who is in his second year as a science and engineering physics teacher at Nipmuc, has been selected as the Massachusetts Science Educator of the Year Award for Worcester County. And as I talk about in the background notes, and as Owen was alluding to, he is just remarkable with the opportunities that he's giving our students with regard to really authentic learning and authentic applications. He has been affiliated for a period of numerous years. I think we're now on the 8th year, going back to his time at Northbridge High School, with his affiliation with NASA and specifically this ICE collaborative, ICE standing for Innovative Conceptual Engineering Design. And just from Owen's description as far as to have these connections with NASA so that our kids can have direct contacts with astronauts, with aerospace engineers, and those opportunities, as we, Owen described last weekend with this epic challenge where it was a 3-day event for our students. So I just wanted to point that out. He is going to be recognized, I believe it's December 6th, John, at a banquet statewide. I will be in attendance. I know the high school administration will also be in attendance. So kudos to Jim, very, very well deserved.
That's excellent.
Then I also want to share with you, I think I also put in a proposal in your packet as well. I was approached by Diane Duncan and one of our parents, a woman who lives in Upton by the name of Kate Flanagan, to develop some prototypes for logos for the district, but also for all 4 schools. As you can see right behind me, we've kind of come up with something over the summer months for Mendon Upton. I'm going to be 100% honest with you, to say it was borrowed from Marquette University, and maybe we just changed the colors. But the real piece that Kate Flanagan, who is a graphic designer by trade, talks about is around having coherency around logos, around branding, and ensuring that our messaging, and I do think our tagline, which is our mission around empowering all learners to thrive, is totally on the money. And it's short, it's succinct, and so on. But I still think that we have challenges with regard to our logos. And Kate has done some work, as you all know how passionate Diane is about the We Care MISCO project. Kate was the designer of the We Care MISCO logo and the t-shirts and so on. But Kate and Diane, in conjunction with Jen Mannion, had a conversation with the student council and with kids in general at MISCO, and it was horrifying in kind of a sad way how few of our kids knew that MISCO Hill's logo or name, moniker, was the Braves, and they had no clue it was, the arrow with the feather. And I think we could have a healthy debate about that logo and the practicality of it and so on. So out of this conversation came a larger conversation about what can we do to bring consistency and coherency to district logos and so on. So as I share with you in the background notes, the idea is she is completely gratis going to develop some prototypes that maybe will honor and respect. We know, the warrior head has been in place for quite a long time. Can we still honor that and incorporate it, but also again have a consistent theme for our districts? I mean, for our 2 elementary schools that they have absolutely nothing, it's really easy. You're starting, from 0. So I will keep you apprised of that. Anything, the mindset is to put together a manageable size committee involving students, student athletes, parents, educators, administrators, to kind of kick around some of the different prototypes that Kate is going to put forward, and then I will share all of that information with you. Okay? Any questions on that? The next piece I just wanted to share with you and also share with the public in general. I know back in August there was considerable attention because I was part of a group that submitted a proposal for a K-8 charter school in the city of Woonsocket, Rhode Island. I'd like to report out that I have, in conjunction with the group, withdrawn the proposal for the school for any further consideration from the Rhode Island Department of Education. I've done it for a multitude of reasons, but first and foremost, as I've said to this committee, both publicly and also in executive session, I am very, very happy, very, very fulfilled in my work here. I can honestly say I've never worked in a better district in all 30 years of my career. And I look forward to the many, many challenges that we have ahead over the coming months and coming years. So I wanted to announce it publicly, but I also would like to thank all of you as a committee for the support that you've given me on a professional and a personal level through this process. It definitely has been a learning experience, and as I said from the get-go, it's based upon work that's happening in this district that I'm super passionate about, but first and foremost, my passion continues for the work that I'm doing leading this district. Okay? And then last but not least, you do have in your packet the FY 2020 year-to-date expenditure report. Jay, is there any line or lines that you'd like to highlight?
Nothing in particular. I've looked through it again just now, and the one thing that we continue to be challenged by maintenance issues. I'm looking at our general maintenance on the buildings, and we've already spent 55% of the budget, and we're just in the middle of November. That's never a good sign. I can tell you the boiler at Nipmuc is not working correctly, both boilers, so we've solved that problem. At the same time, the fire enunciator panel at Memorial has to be replaced, so that'll be the next hit as far as building maintenance. Other than that, I think we're plugging along about where we should be at this time of year. And as always, I'm pleased to report that our snow and ice is perfect so far.
Well, let's hope we come in under budget there. We can move that over to maintenance.
Yeah, right. To replace the boilers.
That wouldn't be the first time that happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All right, so next is new business. Spring 2019 State Assessment Accountability Results.
Okay. So you have a copy of this presentation. We try to make this as painless as possible so you won't glaze over. So what we're going to do is kind of give a high-level view of the data as we have received it within the last couple of months. And then probably the most important thing is kind of talk about some of the specifics as far as the planning and what does it all mean and what are the implications for our curriculum and our professional practices. So we're now in a place where across the board for ELA, we are in MCAS 2.0, which is the updated tests, which is more cognitively demanding, but it's administered strictly online. It's actually been in place for 3 years, but for the sake of accountability, they're only using the 2018 and 2019 data. So 2018 is considered to be the baseline year. And the new thing is for the high school, starting just this past spring, this updated MCAS 2.0 was administered at the high school for the first time. They still have not given us any definitive dates for an updated science or biology tests. So what they refer to now as MCAS Legacy, I didn't make that up, is what is still being administered in grade, limited or no progress towards the targets. And keep in mind, without getting really into the weeds, they have targets for all of your students, but then they have targets for your subgroups. And here in Mendon Upton, we essentially have the subgroup of students with disabilities, special education. We have economically disadvantaged, and then those two groups together are known as high needs, and those are considered to be a subgroup as well. So, there's two other numbers that they report out, and I'll show you how we do. One is a normative component, which is your accountability percentile. So it's essentially a 1 through 99 scale that measures you against other elementary or other middle or other high schools across the state. And then there's the criterion restaurant component, which is also a 1 through 99, but it's basically a number saying, how well are you meeting all of the targets that we've put in place for you, okay? If you are at 75 or higher, it means you're meeting all of your targets, okay? So for 2019, we have two of our schools, Memorial and Nipmuc, that have been classified as substantial progress towards targets, and Clough and Misco have been rated as moderate progress towards targets. So you can see the percentiles as far as how they rate relative to similar level schools, and you can see also the percentage of progress towards targets, okay? So what we're going to do, hopefully not too long of a period of time, is to kind of go through all the grades worth of data, kind of breaking it up, ELA, math, and then science, and kind of give a high-level overview. And again, we're showing 2 years worth of data because to do anything prior to that is kind of an apples and oranges type comparison. So first, this year we're breaking up the Clough and the Memorial data, where you can see, for the most part, the data for grade 3 at Clough in ELA is flat, and it's a decrease in performance for grade 4. SGP, or the student growth percentile, we take very, very seriously. And keep in mind that's also a 1 through 100 metric, where a student is compared to all of their similar grade peers across the state as far as how much they grew in a year based upon their MCAS score. And keep in mind, SGP typical growth would be anywhere between 40 to 60, okay? So if it's closer to 40, anything below 40 is considered to be low growth, anything above 60 is considered to be high growth, 40 to 60 is that moderate range. So Memorial's ELA scores are higher. As you can see, 4th grade, it's a modest increase from 71 to 73% of the kids. And again, meeting or exceeding expectations with the new test is kind of proficient or higher. However, there was a decrease in the grade 3 performance. As you can see, the SGP for 4th grade, there is no SGP for 3rd grade, obviously, because it's the first year the kids are tested, was very nice, 62.8. That's the mean SGP of the about 94 kids that took the test last year. So when we look at Misco Hill as far as the ELA results, again, I think it's a mixed bag where you've got some grades like grade 8 where there was growth, grade 7 there was also growth, a good SGP, but in grade 5 and grade 6, the data is a little bit mixed, but of concern are those SGP numbers, at 35.6 and 34.6. So I think Mo, okay. And grade 10, we only have really 1 year worth of data. 77% of our kids met or exceeded the expectation, a very good student growth percentile at 60.4. keep in mind, it is a more rigorous test, more cognitively demanding test, but there also was a recentering of the data. So keep in mind, for many, many years presenting the high school data, we would be 96, 97, 98% of the kids proficient or higher. The state average was about 90% in 2018, 91%. So there's been a recentering of the data, as we would expect.
There's more space on the upper reaches now.
You got it. And I think we could have a very frank conversation here about the politics behind this and everything that goes into that.
So am I to read the 60.4 SGP as, obviously they're comparing it against, I guess, grade 8? in that
So
situation?
what it is every single kid at Nipmuc who took the test both in 8th and then in 10th grade is measured against how every single kid across the state also took the test in 8th and 10th grade, and they're put in rank order 1 through 100.
Okay.
So the good news is, if you had to take the mean of all the kids' SGP designations, it's 60.4, which is, slightly above it's kind of on the high average end of growth.
So could I interpret that to mean that we get a lot of growth out of our kids in 9th and 10th grade?
Sure, absolutely. That's one way of looking at it. Absolutely. So maybe, I think Maureen's going to talk a little bit about the math results.
I'm going to do a similar approach of just giving some highlights around math. So if you take a look, this is at Clough Elementary in 3rd grade math. You can see that we remain above the state, but we did have a drop from last year to this year's results. And if you go to grade 4 and take a look at the data there, you can see that our results are pretty much the same. So it's flat across the 2 different years, but you'll see in comparison to the state, we're also about 1 percentage point are pretty consistent with it. So that's something we want to obviously keep an eye on. And you'll see that when you look at the SGP, the student growth over there, we're on that lower end of the central range. And when we jump over to Memorial, you'll also see they're similar. We have a drop in that grade 3 at Memorial by about 10 percentage points. One piece we're going to talk about what we're doing and looking at the data later at the end, but one point we do know in that grade level last year is we had a couple we had disruptions in instruction of our core teachers were out on maternities and different things. So typically they've been coming in when we've tracked it with some higher numbers, so we think that may have contributed a little bit to it, but we are looking at the data closely. And also we see a slight improvement, which is good in grade 4 there, and a strong SGP of the 57.2, so that's much higher that we're noting some differences between the 2 schools.
Just to go back here again to the SGP, that is the amalgamation of all of the ratings by percentage that you got for the rating system that we're talking about.
No, it's
Okay.
a rating number. So it's a rank number, believe it or not,
Okay.
of take a kid's score of how they did, in this case, 3rd grade versus how they did in 4th grade, and compare them to all of their peers across the entire state.
But it's based on the change,
Correct.
right?
How much did they grab?
In the test grade.
Correct.
Okay, so that's
Yeah, the
more.
raw scaled score.
Okay,
yeah.
so this is more based on the MCAS rather than based on all of the percentages of metrics that you discussed in the first couple of slides.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And attendance was one of them, and everything.
Right. So then when we jump over to Misco Hill, when we look for some highlights in looking at the results, we can see we like the success in grade 6. We've seen some growth there, about 10 percentage points, which is great, in the right direction. But you'll also note that some other grades have fallen below the state average. In one grade, in grade 5, we have a lot lower student growth percentile that is on the lower end we'd want to take a look at. And some of the work that I know they're already diving into this data right now around consistency and alignment to the standards, and going into all of the different standards to see how we're comparing to the state, and if we're noticing some trends, and identifying whether or not it's a curricular area or instructional area or assessment. And so they from the start of the school year they're on this and working hard at this. And then if we jump to NIMBUC, we have, it's kind of consistent to the other one, which I believe was 77%. So we have 75% meeting and exceeding expectations. It's high above the state average, but again, if you were to go back to previous years because of the realignment, it's lower, just like it is across the state. But we have a solid right in the middle mean for the student growth percentile of 51.
So looking at the science results, again, 5 and 8 are the science, technology, and engineering. In grade 9, we're administering the biology test. It's pretty much consistent of where we've been over the last few years. 52% of our kids, again, we're using the MCAS legacy classifications, are proficient or advanced. 59% in 8th grade, and 90% in 9th grade. And as you know, that biology test is a graduation requirement. I always like to track it over a multitude of years. I like my XY coordinate graph. So if you looked at the trend over the last 10 years, it's challenging. It really is. It's disappointing to see what has happened over time. The state average is very, very flat, as you can see, but you see this general trend downward from 2013, 2014, and it's been back and forth. And then if you look at the 8th grade data, in some ways it does mirror the state as far as generally flat, however it is above the state average. And then if you look at the 9th grade data, we've consistently been in that ballpark of around 90% proficient across the board, and the state average pretty much doesn't change at all. So I'm kind of taking all of this, and it's a lot of data, and you could have a bunch of different looks at it and disaggregate it in many, many different directions. I think the big picture is that this is one piece of the puzzle. And I think it would be a real setback for this district to ever be in a place to communicate that we need to pursue higher MCAS scores. And there are districts across the state that is their sole instructional focus. The viewpoint is that the vehicle for improving curriculum and instruction is to pursue higher MCAS scores. And I understand cynicism of teachers and around, well, if you want me to teach the test, I'll teach to the test. And that usually means some type of rote didactic instruction that's heavily drill-based. I don't think that's what we want for our kids at all. However, the flip side is this is part of the state's accountability system. I don't think that we can ignore it. And I think the larger issue is ensuring that we have high-quality curriculum, that we craft high-quality learning opportunities that have clear alignment to the state standards. And I think the data suggests in certain places, in ELA and in math, in certain grade levels, there's some gaps that exist. There's gaps that exist as far as ensuring that we have appropriate depth and breadth of not even just coverage, but teaching and learning that speak directly to the state's curriculum frameworks. So the work, as Maureen has alluded to, is already happening as far as reviewing these data points, as far as looking at what is the information from MCAS as far as content strands, as far as individual test items, as far as how they relate to the standards. How well are we doing those? And that's the work that she's leading along with our principals and with regard to our data teams. So maybe if you discuss a little bit more of some of the work that's ongoing and ahead with regard to curriculum instruction and assessment.
So just right away in the first couple of months of the school year, we were already doing a lot. And when I was thinking about some of the work that we recently did, I wanted to share out. So we have only had one so far of our ELA K-12 curriculum review team, but a piece with initial thoughts about areas for growth in our curriculum K-12. So I just wanted to share some things that we're starting to identify. We're going to go deeper with evidence and make sure that this is accurate. But we, even in that one meeting and with previous conversations, we are working towards supplemental phonics support in K-2. We really like our core reading wonders as a resource, but we also know that, no core resource has everything and you need to supplement, so that's an area that we've identified and have started to work on, but are researching different materials. We've also had conversations in that first meeting about expanding diverse literary resources in our classrooms. That came up across the board, but at the middle school, and I didn't put it on the slide, but our high school actually piloted a survey to look at resources in ELA, and we did that with the English department. It went out by Department of Ed, and they asked who wanted to pilot, so we did. So we started looking to see what types of resources we're using, and that came up. And we definitely identified K-12 consistency in writing in curriculum instruction. We've had different teachers coming in. We introduced Empowering Writers as a writing program about over 5 years ago, and we definitely often need to come back to it, and we've identified that as an area to work on. The middle school has some training going on with 6 weeks of writing, and so they're doing some workshops around that. We're going to explore that more in this group and see if we want to expand that as an approach to writing. And we are in our last year of our core reading wonders, which was 2014. It was a 6-year subscription, and so we're currently this year in 2 grades volunteered to pilot. They're piloting the Wonders 2020. There's already been one update in 2017, and 2020 is the next update, and so we're looking at that right now for resources. If you go to the next page, in math, we have some middle school teachers. One thing that's come up that some schools are looking at is Algebra 1 in 8th grade is predominantly high school standards. However, the MCAS test is 8th grade standards, and so what they currently do, if you're taking the Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they're trying to bring in the Algebra 1 and also bring in the 8th grade standards. So there's a lot of, now that there have been a few years of this, we have a lot of middle schools that are taking a look at that. So they brought it up, they're doing research in that area to explore that piece. We also have a few middle school teachers who are instituting a pilot of feedback-based grading, and so they're pictured there. They actually received Promising Practices Award recently through the Blackstone Valley Superintendents Consortium, and we also have some high school math teachers that I've seen in action have really focused on more targeted feedback closer to around standards. And elementary teachers are now, as of a couple of weeks ago, we've been exploring a resource that's evidence-based called SD Math, and kids love it, and they went to a workshop on it to explore and see what other schools the successes that they're seeing with it in the classroom, and they're piloting it right now, because they love that, and there's been a lot of growth in schools that have instituted that in addition. And our high school teachers are also up for their math core resource and have been reviewing. So there's a lot of work around resources in these areas and some different instructional approaches. And then if you jump to science, the next page around curriculum, currently we're introducing a program called Project Lead the Way, and we certainly can do a broader overview of this if we end up getting this grant. But we just submitted a grant to expand Project Lead the Way. We are introducing it right now in grade 5 technology. We're doing a design and model unit there. And in grade 7, we're piloting the energy and the environment. And we just submitted, last week I submitted 3 grants to expand it K to 5. To get funding to get some of the modules and training for teachers there, and also to expand the gateway courses that they have, and that would go into science courses and tech courses. Hopefully we'll get the grant. Usually you get some of the grants, but it's all, if you're not familiar with it, it's all project-based, it's all application, it's all inquiry, it's all the type of learning, and we can do a formal presentation at some point, but you have results in achievement as well as the practicality of in the classroom. And with our introduction of the Inspired Innovation Center here at the middle school this year, and I know Dave's talked about that, and I'm sure will in the future, with that and with some resources through Project Lead the Way, we're starting to be able to bring in some additional resources and additional trainings for our teachers, which will transfer over and support our work in science and technology. It's not a cure-all, but it's definitely, we're moving in the right direction for moving our practices instructionally.
I mean, it's nice to see all the steps that you're taking. It'd be nice to try to come up with some kind of logic about why we're seeing the gap between our middle school and the state, or why we're seeing the gap. I mean, there's a definite change. It seems almost like instantly when they hit 9th grade, they all of a sudden become 90% proficient. There's either
But
something...
to be very, very fair, and this is kind of the flip side of the conversation, when it comes to MCAS, for all the different grade levels, there's different, what is known as cut scores. Okay, and cut score refers to the actual raw scaled score that you're going to make the determination whether they meet or exceed the expectations. It's not uniform. Okay?
See, that's what
So
I'm saying.
for
so-
the high school level, that's the mandated test that you need to graduate. I wonder if it's going to have a low cut score or a high cut score.
But I think that's what I'm looking for, is an assessment for what we're really talking about here when we see that.
So that,
I mean, if we compare the grades up, I'm sure we can say 2011, kids in 5th grade were at this level, and they ended up at 90% proficient. But
well, and I say this with all sincerity. I think that the teachers, the 9th and 10th grade teachers at Nipmuc are outstanding. But I also don't think they're so outstanding that the kids became that much more amazing,
right,
and that many more. No, because it also, the middle school and the phenomenon at MISCO is not dissimilar from the phenomenon in most middle schools. And also, if you look at traditionally the cut scores for middle school MCAS tests are amongst the highest cut scores. So it is a very complex picture. I do think your question is on target with regard to, yes, you do have to look at a very thorough examination of, do we have gaps in what, we've been working now for 5-6 years on having a guaranteed and viable curriculum documented in Rubicon Atlas, where, teachers put a lot of hard work into documenting this is what we should be doing to meet the state standards. Well, question, are we following that faithfully? that, you know, are we actually teaching to kids what we say we're doing in our written curriculum? Are we changing things? Are we supplementing, say, at the elementary level from our targeted programs of Reading Wonders and Go Math with things that may be engaging but may not be covering the standards to the degree that they should be?
Yeah, and that's the question I have. And the other thing that I would bring up is if we're gonna go, which, you know, we didn't get a chance to really talk about the Kaleidoscope Collective, but that's really cool.
It's totally cool.
Right, so.
Because
so-
it puts things in perspective that, yes, and again, a lot of times when I'm having a conversation about MCAS, I do feel like I'm walking a tightrope in the sense that I am not saying to anybody, any stakeholder, please disregard MCAS. No, I fully realize it's the rules of the road, it's part of the game, it's part of the accountability system, and it does have a certain degree of value as a single sole snapshot of how well the kids are doing. However, I could easily make the case that it's a very narrow snapshot. And what you're alluding to with regard to high quality performance-based tasks, I think are a larger, more holistic picture
Right.
of how well our kids are progressing.
And in the full knowledge that you mentioned that the Kaleidoscope Collective is going to give us some sort of leeway within the envelope of MCAS.
Correct.
You know, we want to obviously adhere to the state standards even at the end of this thing.
Of course.
We're probably going to have to come back and measure ourselves against the state standards.
Absolutely.
So I guess we just want to be careful about what we're doing with respect to the middle school, because it sounds like, you know, we don't exactly know completely why we're not exceeding the state standards as we usually do for a school district. I don't even know if that's a valid thing to say.
Well,
But-
but it's
Our
also,
standards have been
I
higher
would say
further.
it's complex, and so it isn't necessarily, we brought in this one resource and it tanked and it's because of this resource. There are lots of layers in different grade levels, different teams as to why there are differences in scores during the year. So what Jen's doing a great job. She breaks it down and meets with all the groups and has data meetings, and they go in and they dive deep. We're giving the high level here, but they dive deep into which standards miss. In one case, I'll be honest, a couple of years ago when they switched to a new resource, one grade level didn't get to a portion. They were going so slow in using the resource for the first time that they didn't get far enough along, and they missed a whole section, and all the kids didn't do well on the test in that one section. They realized that was a timing issue.
Yeah.
In other cases, it could be instructional where, you know, in the one grade we noticed it was a bigger drop than normal. Usually they score pretty consistent and high in ELA in that third grade, but then we noted, oh, well, we looked at the scores of the few teachers who were out, and you had brand new. So
Yes,
it's
I
really
understand.
complex.
But it's also, and I realize it takes time because you have to make a change and see if it works, which takes years. So I guess.
and realize sometimes it doesn't take years because, and I'm going to talk about something a little more specific, ironically enough, with
test.
Well, no, but to use Maureen's example, you had a situation where an outstanding third grade teacher was out the lion's share of the year on maternity leave. And, when you're talking about you are testing a cohort of, 92 kids, and she's got basically, a quarter to a third of them, does it impact your it certainly does.
Yeah.
And a piece around it is just the collaboration around data that year, and you don't, or if you have a new teacher in, it can be a lot. So it takes a while for us to go through and parse through that. Can you go to the next page though?
Sure.
Because it does speak to one thing we've noted. We definitely feel, and particularly in our math area, that we need more consistent benchmarking. So when you speak to how can you track it, how do you know? So we plan to pilot an iReady assessment system. We looked at 3 systems last year. That was one that we identified would be a good one to try to pilot this year. So we'll be looking to pilot it in the second part of this year and to try that out. But what I've heard from my colleagues who have instituted it, it is a clear predictor of standards. And you can really predict the students. When we talk about individual students, when you go in, it's the intervention piece too. Once you know that they're struggling, you also need the supports and special ed supports to do the intervention. So that's a whole nother piece on the student by student basis. And that will be able to identify it. And also just to give you a heads up too, something's come up in ELA with new regulations around dyslexia. We have, we're researching additional dyslexia screeners, which will be able to highlight early and identify students earlier. So those are 2 assessment pieces that we know we're going to be needing to put into place, which will give us more data to intervene sooner.
Okay.
And I think probably have mentioned most of this already around instruction and making sure that we have the balance that although we want to improve our achievement scores, we are looking for the growth, we're still want to integrate the portrait of a learner competencies in our work and instructional practices. And we know, and there is evidence that when you have more of the project-based learning implemented the right way, and it does take about 3 to 5 years to learn how to do that really well, about year 2 of that with some cohorts of teachers, that you will start to see growth as well.
And we have discussed the project-based learning was going to have an impact in
Yeah.
our MCAS scores in some way. We
Yeah.
speculated that that could be
Yeah.
true. I don't know if that's happening, if you think that's part of the reason.
It definitely has helped in, I could give a clear example, like in 6th grade, we've seen some, not all teachers have been trained fully in the project-based learning, so we've had about 45 teachers be trained. And so there are some cohorts of teams that have done it, but they're in their first year of trying it. So we are hoping to expand, and it might be an opportunity with Kaleidoscope as well to get more training in. I think that's it.
So, I know that's a lot in a relatively short period of time, but do you have any questions or comments?
I just did it.
Yeah, I knew you did. Okay, thank you.
All right, next, in new business, transfer of E&D funds for capital stabilization account.
Yeah, so I think Joe referenced this in his notes to you guys. We did this a year ago in August. I had talked quite extensively with the Department of Revenue before we did that. What they failed to let us know at that time was that until they certify E&D, we shouldn't be doing it or can't do it, but we did anyway. So they had us undo it in our books this year as far as filing for E&D, and we have to do it again. So you have in your packets the E&D certification. We're going to transfer $675,760 out of that back into stabilization, which is where it was designed for in the first place.
Okay.
That
so
does
you-
leave a balance in E&D of $318,862.
And you need a vote on that tonight?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Need a motion?
need a motion.
Okay, I make motion to appropriate $675,760 from E&D to the MURSD Capital Stabilization Account.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes. All right, so next on the agenda. Subcommittee updates. We have the Superintendent's Evaluation Subcommittee, Superintendent's Annual Plan for 2019 and 2020.
Yep, so we met November 4th, and we presented some of the changes to the superintendent's rubric and evaluation process. We kind of discussed that there were a few different options. going forward, we continue to use the existing evaluation rubric or use this pilot targeted rubric. So we can kind of discuss how we want to move forward with that. And then Joe also presented his plan for his annual plan for the 2019-2020 school year, which I believe he's going to present.
Sure.
Right.
Very brief, streamlined. Much easier than MCAS data. So as I usually, it's kind of a really high-level overview of the annual plan. You have a copy of the draft, which I shared with the subcommittee back on November 4th. Essentially, the heart of the matter, as it is every year for the entire educator cycle, is doing a self-assessment, taking a look at data as it's presented, and also looking at the results of your last evaluation. And if you recall, I received your formal evaluation at the last school committee meeting, and developing goals based upon that. In my case, it is looking at a student learning goal, a professional practice goal, and then highlighting 3 of our district improvement goals. And then, as you know, the implementation of the plan, and then a formative and summative evaluation. So really a halfway point, and then in my case for a full year, okay? So based upon this, hopefully is very timely, our just presentation of 5 minutes ago, my student learning goal does speak to MCAS results, and specifically the disparity between our 2 elementary schools. So the vision is around skillful use of data and targeted interventions to achieve grade level standards, and probably, and I think everybody that this is very much common sense, but when you're talking about, emerging learners, that are still very early in the process with regard to literacy and numeracy, the good news is, if you really look at data very carefully and you really personalize it and you craft interventions, you can have a lot of impact really quickly. So the goal statement is student performance and growth in English language arts and math will be consistent in both district elementary schools as measured by student growth percentile improvements to at least 55.0 in English language arts and mathematics. And right now they're at 40.9 and 40.5 for 4th grade performance at H.P. Clough Elementary School on the spring 2020 administration of the MCAS. Okay, so it really is looking at the disparities that exist, but the actual key actions for the student learning goal do involve my work with both 3rd and 4th grade teams at both elementary schools, along with our principal and along with Maureen, in going deeper, and we've actually already started this process in disaggregating and analyzing 3 years worth of MCAS 2.0 data. And really a key piece is looking at, again, are there specific content strands or standards where we aren't covering the standards to the depth or the breadth by which they should be, or is there a lack of fidelity to the programs that we've had in place or what is in the written curriculum in Rubicon Atlas. I think also is doing an in-depth analysis and planning as far as the data blocks. I know both of our elementary schools, our elementary principals, particularly Deb Swain, like to talk about the work that occurs in analyzing data as part of a weekly block of time that grade level team teachers have. A question is there a disparity in how that time is used in some of the activities that are going on? The 4th point there, again, we, at the 4th grade level, we have the 3rd grade data. We know who the kids are who may be struggling to meet grade level standards. What do those intervention plans look like? How formalized are they? To what degree of consistency are they following through on some of those interventions. Part of it also has a plan to use walkthroughs to monitor consistent implementation of the written curriculum, like I said. And then building upon what we discussed with regard to the Kaleidoscope Collective, I think it's also important to, again, this is not a situation of we've got to teach to the test, but again, it's a conversation about standards and meeting standards with a certain degree of depth and breadth. The vision also is, as far as benchmarks, is to develop at the 3rd and 4th grade level 2 common tasks that will be administered to all 3rd and 4th grade students. Also would be not only administered, but also commonly scored and calibrated by 3rd and 4th grade teams. Okay? Then the second is my professional practice goal, and knowing what we are looking at with regard to the FY 2021 budget cycle, which will begin in earnest very shortly, is around communication and advocacy for the budgetary needs of our districts. So throughout this school year, I will try new strategies and multiple means to effectively communicate around the district's operational budget needs to maintain level services, as well as advocating for the advancement of the district's mission and vision as articulated in our strategic plan. So I think that's something that was directly spoken to in the summative evaluation that I received from the committee. But it's also something that is also it's also a professional passion of mine. I think every year we present the budget, and in my humble opinion, I think we do an adequate job with it, but I'm always looking to how can we present that differently, or what's a different look at it, or what is useful data. And I think the bottom line is more now than ever with some of the challenges that we're looking at in the coming fiscal year, we need to find new ways to tell our story, new ways to communicate what our needs are in a very succinct and easy to understand way. To tell our story, but also to tell the financial story as well. So that's what this goal is really all about, and some of the actions that are detailed speak to, again, the budgets website, mursdbudget.org, which I showed you a peek of last meeting. We have scheduled on December 17th a half-day retreat with our district leadership team to really kind of talk about priorities for the FY 2021 budget, our strategy, and specifically our messaging, so that there's a consistent message across the district. Again, I think we need to do more in reconvening, preferably, I'd say even before the holidays, for a first meeting of the multi-board, so we can get both towns on board as far as communicating what our needs are. I put in a step about my own personal professional development in different agencies, including the Superintendent's Association and MASC, as well as the Rennie Center, and kind of tapping some of the resources that they have out there as far as budgeting strategies and communicating it out. Also accessing other districts that are very successful. There's a few that come to mind. Needham, Worcester, believe it or not, does an amazing job in a lot of different resources, as well as some of the more affluent districts as well, Lexington and Arlington, that are two that come to mind that do a really nice job with that. And then last but not least is utilization and dissemination of communication resources through multiple measures. So thinking about how we're using our new district-wide app, how we're using our new website, how we're using social media a little bit more skillfully and purposefully than we're presently using it. So that's the vision around my professional practice goal. As far as the district improvement goals, we covered 5 of them. When you improve the district improvement plan back in September. But the 3 that I am choosing to highlight are first, the one around enhancing communication and outreach, which I always refer to as the perpetual goal. Goal 2, improving student support services and really thinking about, again, the futures report and the recommendations that were put forward with regard to enhancing our services, but also enhancing some of the efficiencies of our services. And then 3, the ongoing work that we're doing with regard to social emotional learning, or SEL, across the district. So as far as the timeline, as we typically do, there is a mid-year review, which would bring us out approximately 4 to 5 months from now, to the evaluation subcommittee to reconvene by mid-March, and to have a report at the school committee level on March 23rd. And then the summative evaluation, as I do every year, update my online portfolio with some additional evidence by the 1st of October, for the evaluation subcommittee to meet by the 10th of October, and then to report it out at the meeting of October 26th next school year. So kind of a very similar 1-year cycle timeline that is commensurate with what we used this school year. So any questions with regard to goals? Hopefully they're
Not for me, that's very
Pretty
far.
self-explanatory.
On
Pretty
target.
well done.
Thank you.
Yep.
And if I could just provide a little commentary. I did also share in the packet what Vicki referred to as far as the streamlined superintendent's rubric. Personally, I'm a fan of it. And I like the aspect of choosing to highlight specific indicators rather than saying, okay, here's 21 different indicators, you're going to be assessed on them, and so on. As I put in the background notes, a week from today, on the 25th, there's a joint meeting of the Superintendent's Association, the School Committees Association, they're referring to it as a drive-through session, where they're kind of going to review and give a little more information about that. Sean and I will be attending that. I do think it's worth consideration, and I would ask at our next meeting on December 2nd, we kind of have a discussion as far as, does this make sense? We'll have more information by that point, and if it does make sense, what in your viewpoint as a committee would be the appropriate targeted indicators that you'd like me to focus on? Okay?
Yeah, very good. All right, so next in the agenda.
Actually, motion to...
Oh, yes, motion to do the...
approve. I'm sorry, I didn't put that in the background.
That's okay, that's okay. Motion to approve. So do you want to make...
Sure, make a motion to approve the superintendent's goals and annual plan for 2019 through 2020. Second.
any discussion, further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passed unanimously. All right, so let's move on to the next, it's the budget subcommittee update.
So you had last, 2 weeks ago, you had the athletic budget.
3 weeks ago.
3
Yep.
weeks ago, the athletic budget review, I missed that one, I wasn't there. And actually, this coming Thursday, we have the next one in the agenda.
We do. 7 o'clock, Memorial Library, and it's dedicated to technology in the MURSD.
Perfect, so we welcome everybody and all people there, and
And please ask any questions if you If you show up, ask any questions broadly across the budget, we can answer them. So, good, okay. So, on to old business. Any old business? None that we know of, right? Correspondence, any correspondence that we
There
have?
is none.
I get a piece of junk mail. I haven't opened it yet.
I don't think,
How do you
call me
know?
crazy, I don't think we need to report about it publicly.
Okay. Other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of posted meeting. Anybody?
Nope.
All right, the future agenda items, notable future agenda items. Metro West Adolescent Health Survey results are due on December 2nd. And we also have a push-pull surveying update on December 2nd due. Push-pull surveying, oh, good. Boy, that's gonna be fun to see.
It's very fun.
I can't wait to see that. All right, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? 7:14.